She knows a soft touch when she sees words.
Alright, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, we just spent 32 days in Turkey, 7 of which in Istanbul, which is home to the Bosphorus and is also the bridge between Europe and Asia. And we wanted to let you know 10 things that we found that could be extremely helpful to planning your Turkey adventure.
Kicking off the list at number 1 of 10 things to know before you go is 5 words. What's with all the cats?
So this was actually really surprising to us. We weren't really sure, but there are cats everywhere, but they all seem really well taken care of. And it just seems like it's this community effort to take care of the wild animals around, but specifically the cats, or kedis as they're known. And while we can talk about it in depth, it was one of our favorite parts of Turkey, but the best way to get insight into this unique piece of their culture is to go check out the documentary called Kedi, which you can find on most streaming platforms. All right, now the second thing you should know is Grand Bazaar and shopping in general.
So if you're headed to Istanbul, of course you're gonna go to the Grand Bazaar. You have to hit it. It's such a major attraction here. A lot of folks go there thinking that they're gonna get a deal. In reality, it's said to be more overpriced than regular stores because of the novelty of it all. Something that you should know before you enter the Grand Bazaar is that there is an etiquette to haggling. Usually they say online that you should start at about half and then move up to haggle, but it actually turns out that it's considered quite rude in Turkish culture to do that. We've had a couple people turn us away from shops saying that it was extremely rude to start at half and that they can no longer do business with us. We also found that the best time to do your shopping at the Grand Bazaar is first thing in the morning right when it opens. It's traditionally good luck to make your first sale of the day, so they will always give you some kind of deal if you're the first one to their shop. For more established shopping, more traditional shopping, head over to Istanbul Street. This is a large shopping street with pretty much everything you can imagine, from clothes to hardware to jewelry to food. I was even able to get a coffee ground reading by a fortune teller, so go and check it out. It was relatively cheap. Rounding out number 3 on the list is the major tourist attractions of the city, the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque.
So one thing that I was actually surprised by is that both of these iconic symbols of Istanbul are actually free to visit. So don't listen to anyone who's trying to sell you tickets. And the Hagia Sophia was actually turned back into a mosque by Erdogan. It used to be just kind of a museum. So it is closed certain times of the day for prayer. So just something to know. But in our personal experience, just get there early. The line was massive when we try to show up in the afternoon, and waiting out there in the heat, especially if you're coming in summer like we did, is probably not advisable.
For ladies, also bear in mind that you need to cover your shoulders and your hair. At the Grand Bazaar or pretty much anywhere else, you can pick up a head covering or a scarf of some kind. I think they also have them at the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia so that you can borrow them.
Now the Hagia Sophia was amazing, and one thing that I really wanted to see also was the Blue Mosque, which is literally just across a square from it, but it's under renovation, so make sure to see if it's been completed by the time you get there, because really we could just see kind of scaffolding and one piece of the ceiling.
We didn't even film it really.
Other great things to see in the area, there are a lot of palaces, but the Topkapi was one of our favorites and it was absolutely stunning. However, when we showed up the first time, there were tour guides outside telling us that the lines inside were insane and we have to book a special skip the line ticket and to only book through them and to get a tour guide. And you know, of course they would never lie to us, but however, it turns out when we went inside, there actually weren't very many lines and it was super easy to get into. There's also the cistern, which is just down the street from the mosques, and you can get in there. I think it's about $10 US dollars at this time a person, and that was absolutely stunning. You don't need a tour guide, just line up, pay for your entrance ticket, and then you just kind of follow this walkway around inside. All right, tip number 4. This is probably the biggest tip we can give you and the thing that we dealt with the most and probably led to most of our frustrations in Istanbul, but avoid taxis. I'm gonna say it one more time, avoid taxis.
Unfortunately, taxis have become known in Istanbul to be quite the scam artist. We even had one of the taxi drivers message Jeff's sister something super inappropriate, saying that she could pay in other ways with a winky face, which made us feel very uncomfortable with using taxis in general. Avoid them at all costs. There are other ways to get around.
Now, in the event that you have to use a taxi, try to negotiate the price beforehand. Just note that even though you can install Uber, it was actually outlawed and it's basically just run by the taxis anyway, and they will try to message you and negotiate a rate separate to what you actually see on the Uber screen. So just note that even if it says, you know, maybe it's like $4 or $5, they're gonna try and charge you 2 or 3 times that. And Istanbul has one of the best public transportation systems to get around. So if you're coming from the airport, look at the Hava Ist bus. If you're moving around the city, get an Istanbul card. It costs 50 Turkish lira, and then you can recharge it and it'll get you all around the city. If you do have to use a taxi, there is an app called Buy Taxi, and it has an English version of the app. That will kind of give you a better estimate of how much you're gonna pay in Turkish lira. But just note that even though we did that, we still had to pay excess fees for going over toll roads when we took it to the airport, and they still try to charge more than what it said the estimated price was. So just something to be aware of. And for getting around in Istanbul specifically, in most cities, they have what's called like an Istanbul card, or in Izmir, you know, they have a different one, but that'll give you access to all the public transportation.
Needless to say, we did a lot of walking and we recommend that you do the same. Speaking of the Istanbul card, you can purchase them at the automated machines, which is best, but you can also get them at some of the smaller convenience stores around the city. Keep in mind that if you are at the automated machines, you need exact cash, which can be a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, and they only take small bills, 10, 20, and 50 Turkish lira bills, which wasn't great for us because at one point we only had 1 and 200 bills. And when we did buy one at the convenience store, because we only had these larger bills, the first one actually didn't work, so we had to go back. Luckily, the guy just exchanged it for us, but note that we did pay a premium price for it, and it actually didn't have any money preloaded on it, whereas the one you buy from the machine does. All right, item number 6. This is one that probably every traveler wants to know about, and it's something you should Google before you go anywhere, but here are some common scams in Turkey.
Number 1 is the shoe shine scam. This one actually happened to us and I couldn't believe it, and we didn't even realize it was a scam until after the fact. There are people all over Istanbul and they have these little shoe shine kits with them, and what will happen is you'll see them walking in front of you, and then they will conveniently drop a brush. You, of course, being the good bystander you are, will grab the brush and then run up and give it to them, and out of their sincere gratuity, they will say, "Sit down, I'll give you a free shoe shine," and then they'll request that you give them money and then pressure you after that. Jeff actually is the nicest person I know, which I don't know if I've said enough on this channel, but he fell for this one. You can imagine the look on the guy's face when he saw that he was wearing flip-flops. So we just ended up walking away, and that was that.
Yeah, immediately after it happened though, we knew it was a scam. And as I was grabbing the brush, I was like, this is such a bad idea. But luckily I was in my sandals. The guy looked down, he was very confused, and he just carried on with his life. And so did we. The second scam we want to talk about is this badge flashing scam. So we actually saw this on Istanbul Street, and we're a little taken back because we thought this was legit, but someone will come up to you and flash a badge and say they're part of the police and that they, need to see your passport or your ID, and then they'll try and, charge you for some kind of trumped up fine, but they're clearly not part of the police, but you don't really know any better. So just be aware when people come over and talk to you, maybe try and find an actual uniformed officer, because these guys look like they're in plain clothes. They'll say they're undercover or something like that, but just something to be aware of. They are gonna ask for your ID and then charge you maybe for not carrying your ID on you.
All right, rounding out some of the major scams is number 3, the rose scam. This one is incredibly common. We saw it all over the place in Italy. You're gonna see people walking around with large bouquets of roses. They're gonna be trying to hand one to you, and you may think it's a very sweet gesture. It's not. They're gonna hand it to you and pressure you for cash. Don't take the rose, and if you do, drop it on the street and walk away. Number 7. Try to get out of Istanbul if you can. We had a much better experience outside of Istanbul, where things seemed to chill out quite a bit.
So we actually, once we left Istanbul, because we had 30 days there, we went to Cappadocia, we went to Kaş, we went to Fethiye, we spent some time in Izmir, we went to Selçuk for Ephesus, and what we found is once we got outside of Istanbul, most of the taxis used their meters without us prompting. The fares were much cheaper. The people were much nicer. It was just a much more pleasant experience. And this is just kind of something with every major city that you have to go to. You're more subject to like these scammy environments where people are trying to make money off the tourists. I get it. It comes with traveling, but it is a much nicer experience when you just don't have that high pressure sales kind of around you all the time. So definitely, if you have the time, spend some time in Istanbul. Absolutely. There's a ton to see there. It's a beautiful city. The people that we met were actually very friendly for the most part, but we had much better experiences outside of the city. All right, number 8, speaking of getting out, Cappadocia is probably the #1 place you hear of when you think of Turkey outside of Istanbul.
If you've spent any kind of time on social media, you've seen the hot air balloons in Cappadocia. We did this. It was expensive. It took time and effort and waking up early to get there, but this was one of the best experiences that we had in all of Turkey. It was pretty high up on my bucket list, and I would do it again. And number 9, if you want to get out of Istanbul, what do you do to get there?
So Turkey actually has a pretty cool rail network, but we actually ended up not using it just because tickets sell out really, really fast. So we ended up doing most of our traveling by flying using low-cost carriers, which they have a few of. Pegasus is one, which was super cheap and easy to book tickets kind of last minute. We also rented a car in a couple places, and both of these are great options. Just note that gas is expensive in Turkey, and there are lots of tolls on the road and speed cameras. However, we actually never ended up getting fined, and most locals seem to blow through them, much like Greece.
You can also plan to take some buses. Buses are a very popular travel option in Turkey, and they have some very nice ones where you can actually get tea and water service during your route. We actually took one from Antalya to Kaş. It was a very pleasant experience, and it's so cheap. It took about $4 USD to get there.
Yeah, now one thing to note, there are a lot of bus companies, and Turkey has one of the best established bus networks in the world, but not all bus companies are created equally. One of the best bus companies, and I hope I pronounce this right, is Kemal Koç, I think. But they have fantastic service. They do a 2-1 configuration. That means there's, a normal size bus that you're probably used to with 2 seats on the right and 1 seat on the left, which gives you a little more breathing room. And number 10, the question on most people's mind is probably, is Turkey really as cheap as it sounds?
For my entire life, I heard that if you went to Turkey, it would be incredibly cheap. We ended up spending a lot of money here, not just because we were here for over 30 days, but because prices seem to have gone up.
So Turkey actually, at least at the time of this video, is facing rampant inflation, much like the rest of the world. And they're not doing a particularly great job at keeping it under control, which means prices have doubled and tripled. Even though the lira is falling drastically, just expect that to be factored into the price. So it's not this kind of penny playground that you might expect it to be. And in touristy areas, just expect that you're gonna pay a premium to go to certain sites. When you go to Cappadocia, just because it might be a little bit of a cheaper country, you're still gonna be paying premium prices for a hot air balloon, for example. Ours was about $480 for the both of us, which I would say is just a normal price for a hot air balloon.
But we were also able to get a $4 bus ride. So it kind of depends on what you want to do and how you travel. Thank you so much for tuning in for our 10 things to know before you go, Istanbul and Turkey edition. We hope you found this video useful, and if you enjoy the content you see, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, and if you've been to Turkey and you have any tips that we didn't really address, please leave a comment below.